Okay, let's talk about photography competitions. So ever since I started my photography journey, I always thought that winning photography competitions is something that other people do, right? The way that other people get a Nobel Prize or win an Olympic gold medal or get an Oscar. It doesn't seem something that mere mortals like you and I would achieve. However, I have since actually won 2 competitions, so I do know that these other people, that's actually you and I. If I can win something like this, you absolutely can as well. So what's this video about? Okay, today I want to talk about, first of all, what are the reasons why you should absolutely enter photography competitions? Second, how do you actually find these photography competitions? It's not as easy as you might think. You really have to kind of dig around the internet to find enough competitions to enter regularly. And third, most importantly, I'm going to talk about how to actually increase your chances of winning a competition. Oh, and definitely make sure to stick around because at the end there's a special bonus tip just for you. But stop, before we get into the video, let me just quickly introduce myself. I am Desiree, I'm a fine art photographer and I create content for other photographers just like you. Okay, so let's talk about part number 1. Why should you enter photography competitions at all? There are some reasons against it, right? Because first of all, it costs money. Usually you have to pay an entry fee and sometimes it can be quite steep. And second, statistically, your chances of winning are probably quite small. Well, I'm here to tell you that you must enter anyway. If you want to take your photography seriously at all, I think honestly entering photography competitions is kind of non-negotiable. I would almost call it a kind of best practice for photographers. All the photographers that I admire and follow and have achieved something in their career enter photography competitions regularly or have done so in the past and have won quite a few. If you're a photographer and you have won a certain number of competitions, it simply shows to your audience that your work is of a certain standard or quality. If you win competitions, it can also make it way more likely for your work to be considered for exhibitions or for galleries. Also, which is really nice, it actually increases the value of your work. So let's say you want to sell fine art prints or photography prints, you can price them higher if they have won certain awards, especially the prestigious ones, of course. Another great advantage is that often if you win a competition, you will then be featured in the social media accounts, for example, of the organizer, which is very nice to get exposure. Or even better, sometimes the actual prize of the competition is to be included in an exhibition, often a print exhibition. And that's something that's not so easy to achieve or to attain as a beginner or intermediate photographer, so that's kind of actually the best kind of competition where your work will be exhibited as part of the prize. Okay, changing gears slightly, I think another great reason for entering competitions is that it's just a fantastic way of motivating yourself. I think as a self-motivated photographer, as for example I am, because I make art photography, I don't have clients tell me what to do. It's nice to have a kind of external checkpoint, as it were, that there are certain competitions I want to enter, so I make sure to produce some work regularly to actually have material to enter. There's another great thing about competitions, which is that often they have a certain theme. For example, patterns in nature, or the world around us, or identity, or things like that. So you already have a great topic idea for your next photo shoot. So you could, for example, pick a competition a month that has a certain topic and then just produce work exactly for that topic. So that can be very motivating and inspiring. Personally, I have made a commitment now to enter 2 competitions a month. I think it's a very achievable goal, also for costs, right? I don't want to spend too much money entering competitions every month, but I think it's a good habit to get into to regularly submit photos to contests. And I have noticed that since I started submitting images regularly, I definitely have more discipline in terms of creating work on a regular basis. Finally, and that's maybe the most important thing about entering competitions, is that when you do actually get any kind of feedback that's positive, for example, an honorable mention or, I don't know, a top 5 something selection, which I got once, or shortlisting even, or of course any kind of prize, oh, it's such a confidence boost. I know validation shouldn't come from external sources, and of course you have to first be happy with what you make yourself. It shouldn't be about who else is out there. But it does do wonders for your motivation and your confidence in general. Especially for somebody like me, right? I take my photos at home in my home studio. I'm a fine art photographer. As I said, I don't have clients who tell me what to photograph. So I'm very stuck with my own stuff, and sometimes I really can't tell if something is good or not. And it's so nice if somebody else, a jury no less, tells you that they think your photo is successful. It's a really great feeling, and I think it can really spur you on to produce even better work. Because that's another thing about competitions. It's kind of a way of getting feedback on your photography. For example, I entered one photo, I show you it here. I just entered it as part of my, habit of entering so and so many photos a month. And honestly, I didn't think this would win. I just put it on there because why not? And I was really shocked that this particular photo won, because I think I've taken way better photos. So in that way, this competition environment almost serves like a barometer, right, of the quality of your work. Sometimes you can't see it, but maybe other people think this is like your best photo ever. And that's why I think it's so valuable to enter these competitions and to use this, this sort of feedback to guide you a little bit in maybe what areas of your photography you could develop more, or what's worth exploring more. Okay, now we have talked about the reasons for entering. Let's talk about how to actually find these competitions. I was a bit lost with that in the beginning, because there are certain famous ones like the Sony Alpha competition, for example, but otherwise I found it quite tricky to actually find these contests. And by now I have compiled a nice list of, quite large ones and also some smaller, maybe lesser known ones. And I will link that in the description below, because I wrote a blog article about the same topic. And you will find all the competitions that I have gathered with the links. So just check out the description below. Now, in addition, there are lots of smaller competitions that are not quite as easy to find. For example, very often competitions organized by galleries, and those are the good ones, by the way, because that's often the ones where you get actually featured in an exhibition after if you do win it. And also competitions of online publications, or even organizations like universities, things like that. So, and I have found a great solution for finding these kind of competitions, which is following specific Instagram accounts that post only photography competitions. Again, I'm going to link you my favorite one below in the description. I also put it here on the screen. So make sure to follow that account, and you will see almost daily, I think, competitions you can enter. Then next option are these, I don't even know what exactly they are, what I should call them. They're like a kind of platform for photographers that also serve as a portfolio, but also as a competition hub. So two examples I know of are viewbug.com, and then the other one is photocrowd.com. That one I think is quite well known. And so the way it works is you create a profile, you upload all the pictures you want to show off, and then you can enter competitions weekly, monthly, sometimes daily even, on all kinds of topics. I quite like these sort of websites because you also get a lot of feedback again from the actual community. So other photographers will then comment on the photo that you submitted for the contest and might say, top shot or whatever. And it's a nice way to get your photography out there. Next, there are also websites, a bit like the Instagram account I mentioned earlier, that are dedicated only to finding competitions for photographers. I'm going to link two of those websites as well in the description. Finally, this is the analog way, I suppose, the offline way. You can find competitions in a lot of photography magazines. First of all, they will usually advertise it in the magazine. And then there are also a bit more random ones. Like those magazines they have in supermarkets, for example, or women's magazines, health magazines, whatever magazine you can get your hands on. Often there is a random photography competition, and those can be quite nice to enter because they sometimes don't have the biggest competition, or maybe not the highest, professional standards. So maybe they're a bit easier to win than the big names, right? And lastly, there's also the possibility of joining Facebook groups. I quite like this one too, because again, it has a community aspect. So you join a Facebook group, you post your pictures whenever you want, you share your pictures just for fun, but once in a while they do publish photography competitions. You can also enter. Sometimes there's a prize, sometimes it's just for clout. But either way, again, it's a good way to get feedback on your images. Now, the very important third part, how to actually win the photography competition. Of course, that's not something that's totally in your control, but you can tweak your entry a little bit to increase your chances of winning. So first of all, let's talk about the competition category. Now, you might think, isn't that obvious, right? For example, if you are a landscape photographer, of course you enter it in the landscape category. But even there, you could say you can enter it into the nature or landscape or travel sometimes, or is it a fine art photo? It's a bit blurry, the lines. So I have particular problems with this because as a self-portrait photographer, there isn't usually a self-portrait category. So I sometimes enter it into portrait or into fine art, but often fine art has categories. It might be something like abstract, conceptual, digitally altered, blah, blah, blah. So you have to really Really think about this. Don't just enter it wherever and think it doesn't matter, because it does matter. If it's in the wrong category, it won't win even if they like the photo. So it has to be, this is a must do, it has to be in the right category. If you're really unsure and the competition isn't too expensive to enter, I would recommend you just enter it in 2 categories if you're torn between 2. I've done that before and it has also helped me. Next, a really nice tip I think is to research the actual winners from the last year or last 2 years. I find this super useful because you're actually seeing what kind of style of photography has won the years before. This is especially great for art because art is very subjective. And if I notice that the art photography that has won in the last year is similar to the style I photograph or I create images in, then I think my chances are way higher than if the style is totally different. So I will always tailor my entries according to the style of the past winners, or according to which images were chosen previously. And I have sometimes not entered a competition because I thought my photo wasn't really vibing with the aesthetic of the actual organizer. Okay, the third tip is to really think about your caption or the words, that basically the text that you're adding with your entry. I think for a lot of people this is more like an afterthought. They just submit the photo and whatever, don't care about the text. But this is actually super, super important. I've heard from a lot of jury members, they say they really pay attention to that. So I would just absolutely pay attention to that as well. And especially if you do art photography like me, because it's often hard to understand the image perhaps without context. And I always make sure to write 3 or 4 or 5 lines about why I took the photo, what's the inspiration behind it, what's the meaning for me, and even sometimes technical things. For example, the one I showed you earlier, I show it again. This one I put it in the freezer and then I took it out and re-photographed it with the ice layer on it, which is I think quite an interesting technical information, so I also included that in my caption and text edition. Oh, and then the last thing, this is kind of self-explanatory or obvious even, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Always make sure to comply with the regulations or the standards or the whatever they want from you. If they say, for example, color space, RGB, minimum 1000 pixels, no bigger than 1500 pixels, I don't know, resolution 300, just do it all, because otherwise you really mess up your own game. You don't want to lose or not win because you didn't comply with the actual requirements of the competition. And it takes 5 minutes to sort that stuff out, so it's worth it. Okay, we're getting to my favorite part. This is the special bonus tip of this video. This is so boring, but it's so important that you do this. Okay, look, I have been entering a lot of competitions the last year, and you always have to enter the same information, right? They always ask you, what's the technical thing? So what aperture, what shutter speed, what ISO? And then they ask you often, as I discussed earlier, write a caption, write a bit of text about it. They usually ask you when the picture was taken, the date, what camera, what lens. So all of these details in the beginning, I was just always having to find them again. I was trying to go through my metadata and copy pasting, and it was so annoying. So I had the genius idea to just start a Google Doc where I copy and paste once now all this information for every new photo I take, and then whenever I enter a competition, I just copy the information across, and it takes 1 second. And it's so much less hassle. Because actually entering competitions is surprisingly a lot of admin work, so you really want to make it as easy as possible for yourself. And in the same vein, another thing that I started doing is having another spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets. Where I log all the competitions I entered, what's the name of the competition, what's the photo or photos I entered, when did I enter it, and then at the end win or didn't win. And you think, oh, I remember that stuff, but trust me, if you enter more than 10 competitions or so, you really start to lose it. You don't know anymore what you've entered, what photo, when, where, and it gets so confusing. And this is such a nice way to keep organized and just know what's going on. Now maybe all of this sounds very annoying and time consuming, but actually, honestly, it takes me like 10 minutes a week or something to enter a lot of competitions regularly. And anyway, I think it's not really the admin part that holds people back from entering, but it's really more the confidence bit. I know a lot of photographers who would love to win something, but they just never enter because I don't think their photos are good enough. So if that's you, I really, really urge you to just try your luck. Because if there's one truth about entering competitions, is that you cannot win if you don't enter. So just commit to a routine, like I told you earlier, maybe do even one a month. That's already good for the beginning, or I don't know, once a week even if you're feeling lucky, and stick to it. Because it is also a bit of a numbers game, you know, the more you enter, the more chance you have of winning one. Right, that's all I had to share with you today about competitions. Please subscribe to my channel so I can make more content for you, and let me know in the comments if you've ever won a competition, if you want to win a competition, what do you think about competitions. Let's chat. Okay, see you next time.